and know that this meeting is being recorded so you can access it later. My name is Rocky Mold. I am the City and County of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change and Sustainability. I am the Energy Program Manager. I'll be the facilitator of today's meeting. And we have help from other staff members today doing various tasks. Win Vong is our office manager and community outreach specialist. She is going to take us, take us through the ground rules for the meeting. Take it away, Win.
Thanks, Rocky, for the introduction. So today's guidelines for the virtual meeting are very simple, and they're on your screen. So throughout the meeting, to minimize disruptions, please stay muted unless you are actively speaking. However, you can react or provide nonverbal feedback at any time, such as with your comments, or just a thumbs up or clapping emoji when it's appropriate. And to allow other participants the space to speak, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And to ask a question, type in your question in the chat box or wait until the question and answer at the end of the presentation. Haley Cook, our moderator, will be managing this portion of the meeting. And lastly, this meeting is hosted on Zoom, but is also live on Facebook. So hopefully this will allow participants to jump to another platform if the first one isn't working for them. So with that, I will turn it over back to Rocky.
Okay, thanks, Win. So today's meeting, we're gonna introduce ourselves and we're gonna present our draft cap to you. We're then gonna review some of the feedback and comments that we got from the cap, and then we'll have a Q&A session towards the end. I'm gonna be presenting the cap for about 45 minutes. But before I start, I'd like to introduce you all to Matt Gonzer, who is our new Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I was muted. Sorry about that. Welcome everyone to our draft cap. Today we're going to present the City and County of Honolulu's cap. But before we do, I would like to, and then we're going to review some feedback that we've gotten from the cap. Sorry, I was on mute there. I found out for a while. Then we'll have a Q&A session. Before I present this draft cap to you for about 45 minutes, our meeting is probably going to be about an hour and a half total. So we're going to leave about a half an hour at the end for Q&A. Before we start the presentation, I'd like to introduce you to Matt Gonzer. He is our new executive director and the Chief Resilience Officer for the City and County of Honolulu. Matt, take it away. Give us a few words, please.
Yeah, thank you, Rocky. Aloha and good morning, everybody. As Rocky mentioned, my name is Matt Gonzer, and I serve as the city's Chief Resilience Officer and the Executive Director for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And what we're going to be discussing here today is really one half of the climate security equation. We know that global heating and climate change is directly linked to increasing concentrations of greenhouse gas pollution. And we actually have a concurrent process where we are working with several who are on the call here today to develop a climate adaptation strategy to address the hazards and risks that are being posed as a result of climate change. But what was identified, known, and modeled by fossil fuel companies and automobile companies in the mid-1900s, but then hidden, has already come to pass with respect to increasing temperatures and sea level rise. The reason we even need to consider climate resilience and adaptation is because of carbon pollution and previous delays in taking climate action. However, despite this deceit, what is encouraging is a recent awareness in the research and literature of our ability to stave off and stabilize increasing temperatures by reducing and eliminating pollution. Not only that, but early emissions reductions are the most cost-effective and important actions on our path to community and economic prosperity. So with all that, we here at the office are very excited to continue this work with you all, and mahalo again for joining us today. I'm pleased to hand it back to Rocky Mold, our Energy Program Manager and lead for the city's first ever climate action plan, to share with you all the community sentiments around how to take those immediate first steps to set ourselves on the path to emissions reduction and ensuring a cleaner, greener, more beautiful, but more importantly, thriving both economically, environmentally prosperous community. So with all that, Rocky, take us away.
Thank you, Matt. As you know, the Climate Action Plan is our city's plan to address carbon emissions. The overwhelming scientific consensus is clear. The Earth is warming abnormally, beyond normal cycles, and it's accelerating. And GHG emissions from the burning of fossil fuels are the root cause. There are regular periods of Earth's cooling and warming, but anthropogenic or human-made greenhouse gases have spiked our atmospheric temperatures way above those regular fluctuations. On this chart, you can see it's about 1 degree Celsius above the average. And as you know, it's actually the recent numbers show more. It's like 1.2 degrees above Celsius above now. So every time we turn on our gasoline or diesel fueled cars, our air conditioning, computers, TVs, lights, if it's not fueled by some form of renewable energy, we're making the problem worse and more difficult and costly to address now and in the future. Climate change is happening now as well. Here you can see on the screen pictures of localized impacts of climate change. We're already seeing reduced trade wind days, less overall rain, but more frequent and intense rain bombs. We're also seeing sea level rise. Here are just a few examples. In the upper left is an image of Dillingham Boulevard during the 2015 El Nino season. In that period, we had 11 days of record rainfall, 24 days of record heat, and 9 months of drought all combined. The image on the right is of Queens Beach during a king tide event in May 2017. And then lower left is our Friday, April the 13th storm that hit East Oʻahu and Kauai with record amounts of rainfall, almost 49 inches in a 24-hour period on Kauai. And finally, just the other day, on January 25th, 2020, we saw another rain bomb experience, and that's a picture right outside Dillingham Boulevard of our office that Lauren Holt, our communications specialist, took. So to address climate change, our office, the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, was created in the 2016 election cycle by amendment. And one of the first things that we did with the city was we committed the city to staying in the Paris Climate Agreement. As you know, the prior administration pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And at that time, we, along with numerous other mayors and state governments, committed to staying in for the United States. So what that required, actually, part of the Paris Climate Agreement is to create a climate action plan. So when we committed to stay in the Paris Climate Agreement, it really kicked off this process. And there was also a resolution at City Council for us to create a climate action plan. In addition, just recently, this December, we passed a new law, our Ordinance 2047, which codifies the duties and responsibilities of our office, the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, or the Resilience Office. In that ordinance, it specifically calls for us to establish a climate action policy. What is a climate action policy or a climate action plan? It's basically three different things. It is a plan to reduce our emissions by 100% by 2045. But it's really the first step in that plan is creating a greenhouse gas inventory. We want to take a snapshot and identify what our biggest sources of greenhouse gases are. Then we want to create an emissions reduction target and do forecasting to see where we're headed and how we can find a way to reduce those emissions. And finally, it's identifying the specific climate actions and strategies that we can use to reduce our emissions to the goal. But there's also a fourth very important element of climate action planning, and that is community engagement. What we're doing now is a super important part, and we've been doing it all the way through this climate action planning process. Essentially, in the ordinance, we committed to 100% renewable energy by 2045. We committed to achieving net negative carbon by 2045, and this aligns with state law. So all this climate action planning, these steps that we're taking are really about getting to those goals. And once we're done with this plan, we will begin implementation. So here's just a look at the timeline for our CAP development. As I mentioned, way back in 2017, we committed to the Paris Climate Agreement. So really, this all started, back then. Early in sort of 2018, we started building our first greenhouse gas inventory. But then we hired the University of Hawaii's Economic Research Organization and the Institute of Sustainability and Resilience to help us develop this CAP. So they've been our partners and really our subject matter experts developing this CAP along the way. And it was really through their technical expertise and work that really allowed us to have a scientific-based climate action plan. But again, this started with community meetings back in October and January of 2019. October 2018, January 2019, where we had 11 in-person community meetings where we played a climate action game. We then took it to technical working groups, a group of stakeholders and experts from Hawaiian Electric, Hawaii Energy, the State Energy Office, the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, Hawaii Gas, Ulupono Initiative, DLNR, OMPO, and others in the business community to help us chart the course and identify actions that we could take to reduce our emissions. We also went out to the community with island-wide polling, a statistically significant poll of residents on what kinds of actions they would want to see to reduce our emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions and carbon impact. And then COVID-19 hit, and we were actually planning to go out and do an open house similar to our community engagement back in October 2018 and 2019 with a further developed CAP and set of strategies. But COVID-19 hit. So we actually took that process to a virtual process, and we're able to garner a lot of information from the community. In addition, we sought expert feedback to the actions that we'd identified and took it to our city departments to sort of ground truth some of these strategies, whether we could pull it off. So here we are now. Now we've released our draft CAP in December of 2020, and we went into a 30-day comment period, which is now over. We're happy to say that we're going to extend the comment period for another few days to Friday, February 12th. So we look forward to receiving more comments from folks along the way. So as I mentioned, we had a pretty intensive stakeholder engagement process, starting with those 11 community meetings back in 2018 and going through to a virtual open house. In those meetings, we received 614 participants at our open house. We received basically over 2,000 community perspectives on our climate action plan and the types of strategies that we should be and goals we should have for the plan. So as I mentioned, the first step of a CAP is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Essentially, this is a snapshot of our greenhouse gas emissions now and over time, and it shows the sectors where most of our emissions are coming from, or all of our emissions are coming from. And you'll notice here, really the big ones are transportation and energy and buildings. It's with this starting point that we then begin to break it down and look at ways we can reduce this to zero by 2045. And you'll notice we're at about 15 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in all of our sectors. And here's another look at our greenhouse gas inventory. And it shows a further breakdown of the transportation sector. And you'll notice that aviation is a really big part of our carbon footprint, as well as on highway ground transportation is about 18%. And then commercial and residential buildings, energy use in commercial and residential buildings makes up about 35% of our greenhouse gas inventory. And these are really along with waste, these are really the main sectors that our CAP focuses on, because you'll notice they make up such a big portion of our CAP. And I should mention, in developing this greenhouse gas inventory, we used a sector-based protocol. These are the protocols that are recommended by others. They're used by other cities and recommended by EPA and other organizations. And so this really looks at our carbon emissions from use within our jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of Oʻahu. It is not a consumption-based or life cycle-based inventory, which would actually track the emissions of all the products that we use here, all the way through to their manufacture and extraction in other parts of the globe. This is not that, and we're definitely going to be taking a look at how we might be able to implement more of a life cycle analysis going forward. So this is the second part of a CAP, which is taking a look at forecasting your pathways for your emissions and setting targets. And you'll notice this CAP really is focused on a 5-year plan. It is really a near-term 5-year plan, and our goal is a 45% reduction in targeted emissions by 2025. And if you'll notice, without any policy action, actually there would be upward pressure on this trend. And here, the decreasing teal line shows Oahu's greenhouse gas emissions will decrease. These are the greenhouse gas emissions for if our state policies are put into place, chiefly the policy of our renewable portfolio standard. And if the electric utility is able to achieve the goals of our renewable portfolio standard, this is where we would go. And they have a 2016 plan that they put together. And the logic and the assumptions behind this CAP really come from all that work that was done by the utility in the PUC in their integrated grid planning. The yellow line shows you the goals of this CAP, of this 5-year plan. And it shows you how by 2025, we'll get to a 45% reduction if we accomplish and execute all of the actions and strategies that we have in this plan. And that's about 16 degrees less than what just implementing the state policies would get us beforehand. And you'll notice that we don't get all the way there through these plans. Again, this is a 5-year plan, and part of our ordinance 2047 tells us that we need to update this plan every 5 years. So when we update this plan in 2025, we'll be looking at how we can get the rest of the way for these emissions. And here's another look at our emissions pathways, and it shows the teal area is really the emission sectors that we're targeting for this CAP. But there are sectors of emissions that are outside of our control. And this just gives you an idea of what those are. So things like, refineries and petroleum, air travel, which is such a big one. These are out of our jurisdiction. It doesn't mean we're not able to influence them in some ways. And our CAP certainly looks at things that we can do to influence these other sectors and make a difference in these other sectors, but we're not there in this CAP yet. But you will notice that we did, our 45% reduction goal by 2025, if you see that red line, it gets us on a path to carbon neutrality by 2045, which is the goal of the city. So the next stage of a CAP is identifying strategies by sector for achieving the reduction targets. And you'll notice, we have 9 total strategies in this CAP, with a total of 46 individual actions underneath those strategies to reduce emissions. In the transportation and land use area, there are 4 strategies, And essentially, they are, encouraging density and mixed land use, similar to our transit-oriented development type plans. They are enabling and providing multiple modes of green transportation, encouraging mode shifting by, right sizing parking requirements, and then electrifying our own city fleet and supporting policies to electrify and/or, develop renewable fuel technologies in transportation by 2045. The city has set a goal of transforming its entire city fleet to renewable fuels by 2035, and also community-wide to have all of ground transportation renewably fueled by 2045. So many of the individual actions, support some of these specific goals. We're also, looking at implementing, fully implementing our bike plan and our pedestrian plan, planting shade trees to make it more comfortable for people to walk and ride bikes, as opposed to, riding in a single occupancy vehicle, which is the main cause, a big cause of our climate emissions. In the building and energy category, there are 3 strategies. These strategies are really about reducing our energy usage by increasing energy efficiency, increasing renewable generation on our own city facilities, and then a really big area that we play a role in the city is in permitting and land use for renewable energy projects. And so a lot of what we're looking at is how we can make that process easier, but not only make it easier, but also account for bring in more equity and community engagement and outreach in that process when we decide where to put big renewable energy projects. And that's a role that we can play. Also, we are going to lead by example, and part of the Ordinance 2047 was a lead by example municipal energy benchmarking program. We're gonna energy benchmark our largest facilities here. We're also implementing 2 energy service performance contracts. So we're going to be retrofitting aggressively city buildings and facilities to be more energy efficient. For the waste sector, we have 2 main strategies. Promoting waste prevention and conservation, as well as maximizing our own waste resource at the city and county. We are going to continue to push for eliminating single-use plastics for multi-use containers in food and food distribution. We are recommending a sustainable low greenhouse gas procurement policy for the city. And then we want to move towards an RFP to capture methane at our Waimanalo Gulch landfill and at other large wastewater treatment facilities. So with that, that's just a snapshot of some of the actions that we have in our CAP. I would recommend you please go read and take a look at them. There are, 9 strategies and 46 actions that would represent a 45% reduction in 5 years of our greenhouse gas emissions. The other big element of the CAP, again, is community engagement. And all throughout the process, we've reached out to the community to get their feedback from experts, from stakeholders, from regular folks. And we took that into consideration when we developed this CAP, along with our UH partners. One of the big requests was to make equity a priority. And in response to that, we actually created some guiding principles, and including equity as a guiding principle was the #1 guiding principle. So we're going to make sure that we uplift the community voice and frontline communities as we're doing this CAP. We also heard that support for more walkable, bikeable neighborhoods. So strategies 1 and 2 are laser focused on this priority and transit and land use planning. We also heard the desire for maximizing our renewable energy and energy efficiency. The strategies 5, 6, and 7 are squarely lined up with that. And then we heard some feedback about maintaining flexibility, and that's really why we decided to create a 5-year CAP, a 5-year plan for our CAP, so we can we can adjust it as new technologies and solutions, are developed, in time. We'll be able to adapt the cap to address those. And then, we prioritize the actions in these caps really by impact. So here are our guiding principles for focusing on implementation, as I mentioned before. Again, we want to center these actions on environmental and economic justice. So we're committing to convening, community ambassadors to advise on climate action plan implementation. We're going to offer training and additional public engagement on what's in the CAP. And we have design and implementation criteria for how to make sure equity is in all of our actions. We're also going to, committing to, building capacity and resources to achieve this cap. We're going to maximize funding opportunities from federal, state, and other non-governmental sources to support this cap. And we're going to continue to, to work cross-departmentally at the city to achieve this. That's really our role at the Resilience Office is cross-department coordination. And finally, we're going to, continue to try to be as outgoing, adaptable, and transparent as possible throughout this entire process. And we're going to provide online and interactive tools. We've released a municipal energy dashboard on our website as part of this, and we're going to commit to, updating this cap every 5 years. And one thing I'd like to prioritize, decarbonizing our economy will also grow the economy and create jobs. During times of recession, such as now, low economic growth and low interest rates, the multiplier effect of investing in the economy is high. Recent research reports the multipliers as high as 2.5 or 3 times during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. What this means is that every dollar that we invest in decarbonizing our economy will grow by $2.50 or $3. Further research points to 7.5 new green jobs created for each $1 million investment in green infrastructure and renewable energy. With updated building codes, new buildings will save energy costs by 33 to 65%. The incoming Biden administration recognizes this as reflected in its Build Back Better climate plan, which aims to massively invest in directly decarbonizing the economy for state and local governments. The Resilience Office looks forward to working with our new Office of Economic Revitalization to implement this cap. And the cap really acts as a roadmap for directing federal recovery and stimulus dollars into our island's energy and transportation transformation. And we've been implementing this cap all along. Many of the actions in here are already underway. The picture on this slide shows work that's ongoing at our Middle Street bus facility, our Kalihi bus center. This is electric charging infrastructure that's going in to support 25 electric buses. We've actually procured 17 electric buses to start our transformation to 100%, 100% renewable bus fleet. And so this capacity is supporting that. We have additional projects going on at other facilities to match our needs for our electrification of transportation. We have a fleet transition plan, and we're going to be taking a deeper dive through a transportation cap to look at how we can swap our entire fleet, both internally and community-wide, to renewable sources of fuel. We also are in the process of implementing 2 large energy service performance contracts, which are going to massively invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency across our city facilities. So with that, I will get to some feedback that we received from you all. If you all looked at the form, we have basically feedback for the 3 main sectors: ground transportation, buildings, energy, and the waste sector. And if you'll notice here, we asked, which of climate strategies in the ground sector would you support the most? And really, strategy 2, enabling and providing multiple modes of green transportation, really stuck out as a strategy here for folks that answered our survey. There is a desire to see shifting to new modes, walking, biking, and complete streets. transit-oriented communities, safe pathways, reducing the need for single occupancy vehicles, and there's concern about scarce land. And the competing uses of land as we transform our economy. Those are some major themes of the comments that we received. For our electricity sector, really this is a little bit more evenly divided, but expanding renewable energy planning and permitting, came through, and expediting renewable energy planning and permitting came through as the leader in terms of preference. Also, a desire for distributed energy solutions. All structures that require energy should produce their own. A need to reduce time and hurdles of installing renewable energy was identified. Expanding and expediting permitting, but not at the expense of ag lands and ag goals, was mentioned as it is in our comments. There was strong support for maximizing renewable energies wherever we could, but also keeping an eye on equity and targeting low to moderate income communities and frontline communities through programs such as our Solarized Oʻahu program, as well as our Healthy and Resilience Building Initiative. Energy efficiency is mentioned as the least expensive resource, and there was a suggestion that we more aggressively adopt building codes to establish Hawaii as a visionary leader in energy efficiency, and that we should consider a zero code and some of the New York City benchmarking and performance standards that are limiting emissions from buildings and setting specific goals. And there was a request to align the definition of renewable energy with the states, which would allow for other technologies and fuel sources beyond solar and wind. Large scale renewable energy projects need to be carefully balanced with the community needs and fears. And that's actually the very first action in Action 7.1. It's all about managing and balancing community needs and fears with our massive need to build renewable energy projects in our built environment and on lands. In the waste sector, many parties wanted to see a little bit more in the waste sector, I think. They want to see more of an emphasis on waste reduction and consumption, and taking a closer look at sort of agriculture and forestry, as well as resources to reduce energy. Some commenters felt that we should go straight to a consumption-based inventory and have more of a life cycle review in order to have full merit, for this sector. And there were questions about how we accounted for H-power. To be sure, there are limitations to the sector-based emissions approach and the protocols that we chose for this. We take our cue from the EPA and the Global Protocol for Community-Based Greenhouse Gas Inventories when we use the sector-based inventory. That said, going forward, we will take a look at more of a life cycle-based, consumption-based review. And right now, the waste sector is relatively small compared to the transportation and energy sectors. So that was one of the reasons for a lot of the emphasis that we put on those other sectors. But over time, the waste sector is going to become more and more important. And we recognize that for sure. So again, this is a 5-year plan, and we're going to come back, every 5 years and update this plan. So I think the science about consumption-based and life cycle analysis is going to be much more developed come 2025. So I think at that time we'll be able to potentially look at updating this section significantly. But we hear your comments on this. So with that, I'll take it kind of to next steps. We're going to extend the comment period for this CAP through Friday, February 12th. We encourage everyone on this call and elsewhere to read our CAP and to provide their comments. And we will incorporate those into our final draft. Once we finalize our draft, sometime in the first half of this year, we will be submitting our CAP to Council for adoption by resolution. And of course, once the CAP is adopted, we will begin prioritizing and implementing the various actions. We'll take a look at each of those 46 actions, and we'll develop plans to really execute those and operationalize them throughout the city. So with that, I'll hand it over to Haley Cook, who will moderate our Q&A.
Thanks, Rocky. Thanks for that great overview. I just wanted to jump in here and let folks know that we want to hear from you. If you have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'll keep tabs and make sure they get answered. Or we welcome you, if you feel comfortable, to turn your video on, raise your hand, and we can have an only slightly awkward virtual conversation. So with that, I just want to open it up. There should be, if you want to make yourself known to say something, if you click on the participant list, you should have an option to raise your hand. And I already see Chip Fletcher has his hand raised, so maybe we'll start there. Chip, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Haley, and thanks, Rocky. That was great. And just kudos overall to your whole team and to the folks at UH who put this together. So my question is, in order to actually reach the Paris goals of 1.5 or 2, we need to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And where, Rocky, you may have mentioned this, where is sequestration, or is sequestration anywhere in here?
So as of now, sequestration really didn't come to the fore as one of the high impact strategies at this early stage. As you know, if you looked at our inventory, such a large component of our emissions come from buildings energy and energy from transportation. So those are kind of low hanging fruit. We did get comments and feedback that folks wanted to see more about ag lands and the forestry, segments in our CAP. But right now, that sequestration, I think like the science there, the technology there is a little bit more in development. So we really were focusing on actionable technologies for those low hanging fruit sectors that we have now. And that's why, again, we have a 5-year cycle for this. I mean, we're going to be continually looking at ways that we can enhance the actions that we've identified here with further cost-effective and viable actions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. So if you have follow-up, that's great. So to your point, yeah, I mean, there's probably some stuff in terms of the AFOLU category, the agriculture, forestry, and other land use category, which is a pretty relatively small segment of our emissions. However, it could, as a sink, it could have an outsized impact, and I just don't think we have the science there yet to have identified them for this CAP.
Well, I think Hawaii could be a global leader. We have most of the world's climate zones here, and we could do incredible research with regard to, carbon storage in the soil, as well as the regenerative agriculture element. So even though it may be a small part of the emissions, I think it could play a huge role in carbon capture. And maybe to that end, you guys might think about a whole additional report in a year or 3 focused entirely on carbon drawdown. Like, what can the city do in that whole end of things, pulling carbon out of the air? And I just want to say very quickly, and then I'll be quiet. Hawaii can play an outsized role in demonstrating to the world. So how to do this stuff, and not just drawdown, but everything else that we're talking about in terms of the biodiversity crisis as well as the climate change crisis. So it is worthwhile, and we do save ourselves by showing the rest of the world how they can address these problems. So wouldn't it be wonderful for Honolulu to have its own drawdown report?
I agree wholeheartedly, Chip. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher, for those words. I should note, I do think, in that ordinance 20-47 that identified the roles and responsibilities of the Resilience Office, we added, some departments in there. There's a zero waste, strategy that we added, and then we have a food and ag specialist, and food and ag program. And really that we have added that capacity, but it's relatively new for the office. So that, again, that might explain some of the why we haven't gone as much into that type of stuff, but certainly for the future, I think we will, and we should. And there absolutely is an opportunity. Hawaii has led the way on some like renewable energy penetration, but I think we need to start, translating some of that leadership into some of these other categories, and drawdown for sure is one of those.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rocky, and thanks, Chip, for those comments, and to Sherry too as well for chiming in the chat. Encourage others to do that as well. Dorothy has her hand up, so I ask you if you want to unmute and ask your comment.
Hi, Dorothy Mulkern, longtime Hawaii resident, but I'm living in Seattle right now, working for the Port of Seattle. I was reading the report or the plan yesterday, and I noticed that in the beginning, you're like, we're focusing on what we have control over in the plan. And by the way, the plan is amazing and it's beautifully put together and it shows a lot of work on everybody's part. What I didn't see was, even though you don't have control over like tourism or the military, I'm sure they have, like, these sectors have their own plans that could play into what you're trying to accomplish. Did I miss a page that talks about like these plans and how this plan can kind of partner with those? Or are you aware of these plans? What is the military doing?
Yeah, so we're aware of those plans, and we talk about the need for working with other entities in different jurisdictions with different jurisdictions, and how important that is for the future. But this cap really is focused on those near-term actions that we can take, that we have more control over. We have actions that mention things like advocating before the Public Utilities Commission, right, and making sure that we put the city's voice forward in various venues with other entities. But we didn't do kind of a document or review of other plans and how those might be incorporated. So I think that's a great recommendation for future work. And Matt, you want to chime in?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky, and thanks for the great question, Dorothy. Especially in this first attempt, we wanted to be as crystal clear, bright-eyed and open and honest about where the city has direct jurisdiction to influence change. And the really encouraging thing that Rocky highlighted in that graph charting everything down was that, the additional measures on top of state legislation would decrease it even faster in the near term as well. We don't want to discount other influences, whether it's aviation, marine transportation, anything that is part of operations and investments for Department of Defense. I think what's really encouraging now is a renewed awareness of the global risk that is climate change, and how there were past actions to address operations of military installations as well as their deployment, which will become critical components here locally, and building on any legislation that's being proposed at the state level this year, learning from and coordinating with entities like Department of Transportation as they are facilitating fleet procurement practices across all state agencies, because they actually share the same goals and have the same state law. So the most recent ordinance aligns us with state law. We used to use the state law as our backstop, but now we are much more in lockstep, and we look forward to the continued coordination with state agencies as well as their State Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. So again, the encouraging thing is that it's in law. We must revisit the plan on a rather near-term cycle. Certainly want it to be as aggressive as possible on the things that we have direct and immediate influence over.
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy, for that question. I'm going to go next to Jan, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sure. I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think you folks have done just a fantastic job on this plan. I have read it, and I'm really happy that our city is doing this, because I know a lot of places aren't. But there still are a lot of people who don't believe in climate change, and I think that one of the focuses has to be on participation or education, and I'm just really in favor of some kind of public service announcement barrage, almost the way they've done. Someone's doing it for the pandemic for Hawaii, and I think that information about really just describing, educating people on climate issues, climate urgency, and climate solutions. And then finally, the way Chip was talking about the regenerative agriculture, and also I think something as simple as, it's not simple, but it's tree planting is a way to get the public involved and energized about this. I think because if you have the public with you, everything becomes easier. You can get bills passed, you can get resolutions passed, you can do lots of things if the people understand why it's necessary. And I think that you really have to get that public involvement, and that will really, it'll, and the lead by example, that I love through the whole entire plan. That to me was a big part of it. So, I really appreciate what you folks have done. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, that public outreach and education element is so important. We can't forget that. We can't forget that we need to continue to remind people how urgent this is, and of the science of this, for sure. And some of us practitioners sometimes get deep in the weeds on this, and we're convinced, and we don't fully understand how others can't be as convinced as we are sometimes. So being reminded of this is really important. So I thank you for that. And I note your comments. I saw your comment on that in our feedback. That is definitely something we'll take into account. And I mentioned those guiding principles that we developed. Remember, that first guiding principle is all about what you just said. And so we realized that there are some things that have to be done that overarch all of our actions all the time, and that we can never lose sight of. So that's why we developed those guiding principles. And community engagement, and we should probably add education to that phrasing now, to your point, which I take your point. I totally agree with that. Anyone else want to come in on that?
Thank you, Jan, for those comments. Rocky, I want to direct you to a question that came into the chat. Andrea was asking if encouraging the preservation and adaptive reuse of our existing historic built structures was part of the plan, one of the strategies for reducing carbon output.
So thank you for that question. I recognize that question from the comments as well. I think that's a great idea, and we'll take a look at it. We definitely have in our sites, developing, targeting the existing built environment. We haven't specifically, mentioned historic buildings, but there are actions in there that are such as energy benchmarking and building performance standards, and the Healthy and Resilient Buildings Initiative, which are targeting exactly what you're talking about for other buildings, right? But not not historic specifically. So, but maybe, you know, we can specifically, you know, add that in, because as you mentioned in your comments, I remember, you know, those historic buildings aren't going to be changing, right? They're protected, right? So we might as well use those as a resource if we can. And very much we're looking to do that through those actions. If that didn't come through clearly enough in it, you know, as we develop those, you know, those actions in, you know, section 5 and 6, strategies 5 and 6 of our plan, we'll look to incorporate that stuff in it.
Can I just
Yeah.
say something?
Go
really
ahead,
quick?
Andrea.
This is
Thank you.
Andrea. Yeah, sorry, I can't put my video on right now. Thank you so much for that. I do agree the plan is awesome. And I know from working at a small nonprofit how much work goes into things like that and how you're limited with your capacities. I think the other piece I'd like to add to the preservation of historic structures is there's many structures that are not listed on the registers. There's many structures that are demolished because people don't have, business owners for commercial buildings don't have the incentives necessarily or the education to understand why it makes sense to preserve them or how they can utilize certain things to make it advantageous. And so there are a lot of sites and structures being demolished that is certainly there's huge carbon used to create those structures and virgin materials. So I just wanted to say that I'm with Historic Hawaii. We've been around since 1974. We'd be happy to partner with you to find solutions that could fit into that category and do the work on the other side to help make that happen, if that's helpful for you guys when you're ready to address that.
Yeah, thank
Great.
you, Andrea.
Thank you.
My response was not going to be directly related to how best to incorporate it into the actions as proposed currently, but certainly on the implementation, that's critical. And for those that are listening in, to Andrea's point, the most efficient building is the one that already exists, right? It already has all of the embodied carbon from when it was built and constructed. Obviously, the challenge is on the performance of any of those buildings. So much of our physical environment already exists today. So regardless of new things that get built, how do we facilitate and manage and support reinvesting and retrofitting existing structures? And the same goes for all of our needs around climate adaptation. We're really just in reaction mode to help facilitate community and environmental change. So finding ways to work with either building operators or the property owners and the landowners themselves to support keeping those buildings running as efficiently into the future as possible, both for the occupants and their well-being, to Rocky's point of healthy, resilient buildings initiative, but also on the emission side. We need to find ways to keep what we have, but make sure that they're running tip-top shape into the future.
Yeah, and it's really the area it's really actions 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4 where we would incorporate this stuff, and we're already executing on these actions in a variety of different ways. So you know, as we go into the implementation phase, we'll look at enhancing them to community feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea, for that question and those comments. I don't have any questions on deck, so encourage others, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat or raise your hand. We do now, Dorothy has raised her hand again, so because we don't have any other questions coming in, I'll turn it back over to Dorothy.
Since nobody else has a question, so that next phase for implementation, is that when you're gonna talk about the cost of implementing all of these strategies, or like, is that when you're gonna assess that? Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah, so so we have throughout the climate action plan that you'll notice we have this rubric that takes a look at various criteria for each of the strategies, and cost is something that we looked at for each of our strategies. It was more of a it was a mix of qualitative and quantitative, but it was really a high level look at the strategy level, not at the action level, at the costs and benefits and carbon benefits and co-benefits and all that kind of stuff related to each of these actions. So we did do an assessment of that from more of a sort of a light quantitative, qualitative standpoint. As we implement each, the discrete actions within these, whether they turn into a policy, an ordinance, a project. At that stage, we will be looking at it more closely at the cost benefit analysis where appropriate. I mean, some actions, need a little bit more stringent review than others. And so, at the time of implementation, that's when we will be looking at that.
Thank you.
Jan, did I see that was a hand raise? Yeah, go ahead. You want to
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, I just had a question about kind of the city council connection between the plan and when it has to go through the city council and when the resolution, provided it passes, is in effect. I just I don't want it to be a roadblock, for all of this. And I think the council, I'm not sure what they know of the plan and their role in this whole thing.
Thanks, Jan. I'll maybe just address that directly, Rocky, if that's okay. So council, definitely those that were in their seats during previous cycles were our partners in all of the community outreach. So there's a long history there, and many of them, are in their seats representing those districts today. We also had the great opportunity to provide an update and a briefing on the draft Climate Action Plan at this year's first hearing of the Transportation, Sustainability and Health Committee, now chaired by the new council member, Radiant Cordero. And we've been having additional briefings and updates with council members on a one-on-one basis. To your logistical question, the new ordinance identifies the path for adoption of the Climate Action Plan, and that's once introduced via resolution, council has, I believe it's 90 days to accept or not accept. If no action is taken, the plan becomes the city's Climate Action Plan. But they have been great partners all throughout the work, and we're pleased to see their continued leadership to bring these benefits to their neighborhoods and residents.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jan. Great question. I still don't see any other questions coming in, so maybe I'll check in with Wynn and see if any questions have come in on the Facebook since we're live streaming over there.
Hi, Haley. We don't have any additional questions from Facebook.
Okay, thanks, Wynn.
Wow, that was a much more efficient process. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this virtual meeting. Mana, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Aloha, everyone. I'm Mana. Sorry, I have to run in a minute. I wanted to let you know that just a little background, I'm a student at the law school and I'm taking the climate change class, which is so just insightful and helpful to understand all of these things. And I'm just getting into it. I care about the climate and climate change, but I haven't really been in it and participating with you folks. So I'm just in awe of the work you're doing, and I'm so grateful for all of you. One thing that I did want to mention, and I mentioned in the comments, was just about I really noticed that there is no reference to Aina in the plan. And Aina was mentioned once in a comment, and the Okina was going the wrong way. It was an apostrophe, and it's a small thing. I know that. But I was very much a part of the Mauna Kea, Protect Mauna Kea movement and the Kahuku turbines. And I think we need a person that's doing outreach. I know Jan was talking about educating the community and trees. And I think thinking about the way the colonization and just the displacement of people and the communities on the west side specifically, and how we need to educate them. And I think in order to get there, we really need to bring that in, instead of just like skirting around it, because it's a real issue. For me, when I see the wind turbines in the plan, it's like, this is amazing, but environmental injustice, and I know you addressed it, but I think having a specific point person who's committed to culturally focusing on Kanaka Maoli and Aina and the people who are going to be the most affected by climate change. You know, it's hot out there. Like they have multiple people living in homes. I mean, all of these things we know. But I really want to bring it to the forefront and make sure we're addressing those conversations and issues so this can reach more people. And because I want people, you know, I want Kanaka to look at the plan and feel like this is part of their solution too. And right now, I don't think it looks that way on its face. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that's the input I have, and I don't know how to make that happen. But if there's any way that I can kokua and help you guys engage, I'd be happy to do that. Any thoughts?
Mana, I'll give it to Rocky to respond to any of the specific, you know, the actions, how they're described, the narrative thereof. But I wanted to, thank you for your, you know, standing up and offering that comment. And certainly Olelo Hawaii and representation of the language is no small thing. So please rest assured that we will make sure we go back through and revisit all of the language and the writing. And if there's anything even in our presentation here, we should have caught it beforehand, right? And we'll make sure that it's addressed and represented correctly moving forward. So please, one, just thank you for your commitment and standing up and offering that, but please don't allow us as an agency to even consider for 1 second that it's a small thing.
Okay, thank you. And I know it's hard for me, especially because I'm so grateful, and I think the work you're doing is incredible, and we need more of this, right? We need so much more of this. But I think as long as we're all open and continuing the dialogue and conversation, we're all going to be better for it. So I don't want you to feel like.
And a lot of the work that is represented in the draft was happening at the time of some of the examples that you're alluding to, and the pivots and turns are intended to also acknowledge and be responsive to those community conversations that were had and that were had with us, as well as area representatives for any of the deployment of any of these particular projects. So while this presents sort of the things that we scientifically know need to happen to address emissions, it's the devil's in the details on how we support and prioritize the actual implementation of any of these actions. So I'll hand it back to Rocky as the lead for any of this.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Mana. Absolutely. I mean, we're trying. You know, I mean, we actually have an equity program manager, Lala Nuss, who's hired, who fills that role for us and reminds us continually and constantly that we need to make sure that these considerations are in everything we do. We've committed to leading with equity in sort of everything we do, because equity is not just about like catching up. It's about making amends for past injustices and past inequities. So target, a lot of the, it was in the Healthy and Resilient Buildings Initiative. We're actually going to target frontline communities with support and with help to go beyond to make up for sort of some of the past injustices. And as you know, it's one of those guiding principles that we developed. It's really that guiding principle on centering on economic and environmental justice. That's really about trying to address what you say. Now, if it's not represented perfectly in there, we're working on it, but we're trying to make sure that that's in there. And we're going to be maintaining our public outreach and trying as hard as we can, not just to have meetings like this, but to reach out to people where they are and where they live, as opposed to having this venue. And as soon as we get through this, this horrible COVID time, and we can get out in the community a little bit more, I certainly think we will be doing that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I wanted to give you my comment as well because I am coming so late. So it was like an honest and kind of embarrassing thing that I noticed, because I'm frantically on Saturday before the comment period ended trying to follow the footnotes, because I'm sure you guys have done a lot of the work. I just couldn't see it represented in the plan. And I wasn't able to follow all the details of it. So I wanted to give you my honest, just like from looking at it from the perspective of a community member who maybe wasn't interested in digging deeper, that it could be more accessible to some people, and I think therefore have a greater outreach. But I have to run to class. Thank you so much. I will be following along, and I'm looking forward to supporting you folks in any way we can help get this thing going.
Thanks, Mana, for those comments. I'll just say the deadline for the comment period has been extended. So if you want to go back, take some time to take another look, get back on our website and give us some more comments. Thanks so much.
I will. Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.
And Rocky, I'll just note, no other questions so far, but a comment from Amy that some of the sequestration methods and restoration efforts like tree planting and wetland work may be some great opportunities to bring community into the process. And then another comment from Nancy about the importance of protecting housing affordability while implementing our climate actions and the role that government can play in creating a level playing field for creating economies of scale and carbon neutral construction. So thank you everyone for those comments.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at this comment from Ms. McPherson. Absolutely. We want to bring in the Green Building Council and the construction trades in everything that we're doing and reach out to them, to ensure, housing affordability, that there's a balance of needs going forward between housing affordability and climate action. Certainly, we think, from a long-term perspective, helping long-term affordability, not just in housing, but overall, is definitely one of our goals. But yeah, I take your point in that. And you're mentioning, yeah.
Oh, hi, it's Nancy here. We have been working with Lala Noose. I just wanted to give her credit for going the extra mile to make sure that, the needs of DHHL beneficiaries have been taken into account in the work that your office is doing. So I really wanted to commend you for that. And yeah, so just keep up the good work. It's really exciting to see this plan moving forward. So, and we will be submitting some comments in writing by the extended deadline. Mahalo.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'll mention, Lala came on board, sort of halfway through the whole CAP process. She is our equity program manager, and her contributions have been, integrated into this plan for sure. And to the extent that we didn't capture everything Lala was promoting, that's on me and us. But we will, again, this guiding principle of putting socioeconomic justice and environmental justice, in the center of everything we do, we take that very seriously. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one last thing that, a lot of what we struggle with is there's sort of an old school mentality that it's either or, that it's either a healthy, walkable community or it's affordable. It's either, sustainable and climate, positive, carbon neutral, or even carbon negative, or it's affordable, that it's an either or proposition. So I think the more that we can educate people, I liked some of your, language in the plan that talked about how and in your presentation that says it's economically better. We really have to make that argument as strongly as we can, because a lot of people just have it stuck in their head that, doing things differently means making them more expensive. And in a place where it's probably one of the most expensive places in the country to build housing, we really got to watch that. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it in one of our slides. We see the incoming, Biden administration's, plans around climate as potentially, providing some resources that will help to, invest in this decarbonization effort, and to do it in a way that is, both, economically and environmentally feasible and technically feasible, but also taking into account, these equity and affordability concerns. Of course, the whole reason for our updating of building codes is to ensure that that emissions and costs are going down for residents who live in those buildings going forward as well. So it's the upfront cost, but it's also the long-term operating costs of buildings that are going to last for 30, 40, 50 years. We want to make sure that they're made in an efficient way as possible for the residents that are going to be living in them.
Yeah, thanks, Rocky, and thanks, Nancy, for your comments and for joining us today. I'll give folks a minute here. If they have other questions, they want to type them in or raise their hand. And just thinking forward to next steps, we spoke about this council resolution. If you want to stay informed about not only the climate action plan, other resilience office initiatives, but things that are moving through council related to the climate action plan, encourage you to go to our website and sign up for our newsletter where we give folks those updates if you're not already signed up. I know Wynn had dropped the link into the chat previously, but maybe she can do it one more time. Thanks, Wynn. Just to stay informed. But with that, I want to give space for others if there are more questions that folks have. If no further questions, we can wrap up early, which is always a treat.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We'll give it a moment here if something comes up for someone. But with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and for going through our CAP and reading it with open eyes, open attitude, and urgency and good faith. Really appreciate it.